So how did you both ultimately decide on UVA? Because I think you both had significant others to take into account. Were they hoping for a certain outcome? Were you hoping? How did it all come together?
Yeah, so shout out to Denise, my wife.
Shout out to Denise.
For real.
This is Admissible. I'm Natalie Blazer, Dean of Admissions at UVA Law. I am so excited for today's episode, you guys. Here at UVA Law, one of our most beloved student organizations is the Older, Wiser Law Students Organization, commonly known as its acronym, OWLs. The most perfect acronym, I should add, because owls are known for being wise, even though I did look this up. That's a myth. I did research this. Anyways, we're going to go with it because I have two very wise guests on today to share their wisdom with our listeners. Joining me today in the studio are third-year law students Neil Noronha and Kathleen Samuelson. Neil and Kathleen, as older, wiser law students, have very impressive and unique backgrounds that began even before they ever set foot in law school. So actually today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves to our listeners and highlight what they choose to highlight. So Neil, Kathleen, can you each share anything you think is important for listeners to know before you got to UVA?
Yeah, so Neil Noronha here from the D.C. area, Bowie, Maryland. Grew up more or less around that area in terms of high school, college. So went to Gonzaga College High School, a block away from Georgetown Law. Then went to Georgetown undergrad, and then worked in government for about 2.5 years after undergrad, working in the Obama administration, both in the Defense Department and then on the National Security Council staff. After the administration, spent a year abroad in India on a fellowship called the Henry Luce, then came back, did another fellowship on the Hill with Senator Duckworth. And then before law school, went to business school, and then after business school, went to the Boston Consulting Group here in D.C., in aerospace and defense. And so I think the biggest takeaway from my very varied journey there is that you do find that in the owls is that not one owl has a very similar path. And that kind of speaks to the testament, especially at UVA Law, where the diversity of experiences is something that makes a very good classroom environment in engaging with these subjects. And so if you're out there thinking, do I fit that mold of what UVA or any kind of a school like this, I would definitely say yes, because there's just a lot of varied experiences and they all add and are additive to the classroom environment.
Such a great point. Thank you, Neil. Kathleen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen. I'm originally from Harrison, New York. It's about 40 minutes from New York City. I went to Brown University for undergrad. I studied biology, and then I stayed there and I did a fifth-year master's in biotechnology. After that, I moved out to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I started my career in biotechnology. I worked for a 90,000-person Swiss-German company. I became an international product manager, and I did that for about 4 years before I realized that is not what I wanted to do with my life. And I pivoted pretty hard, and I took a paralegal position at a small criminal defense law firm in San Francisco. And that's what I did for the last 2 years before coming to law school. It allowed me to confirm that I wanted to invest in law school and that I wanted to become a public defender.
Love how you both have such interesting but yet very different backgrounds. And back to Neil's point, like that is sort of what we try to achieve at UVA as a whole, but especially I feel like in OWLs, you guys are represented with just really different paths, which I love. Having shared sort of your more professional and academic sides of your background, I'm curious, just from like a fun personal standpoint, what's your favorite thing to do in Charlottesville?
I'm married, so me and my wife, we both like walking around. The nature here, I'm a big DC fan, but the nature here is something you can't really beat. So whether it's for a run in the morning or just even a evening stroll with my wife, I think that's kind of the nice part. You can see now we're in October, so the leaves changing and all.
Beautiful.
That's just something you don't get in major big cities. So we do value that kind of environment and kind of energy that comes around with that.
I also love being outside. I'm a rare Carlist type in Charlottesville, so for me, a big adventure is going over to main grounds, or central grounds. But I love walking and running around the campus. I also love trying new restaurants, and I'm on a mission to try every Thai place in Charlottesville. I think I'm pretty close to trying most of them.
What's your favorite Thai so far?
So far, I mean, Monsoon is great. And then I would say there's this place, Tangerines, that I recently discovered.
Okay, I've heard that's
It
good.
might be the sister to Pineapples. They have very similar
love
names.
pineapples.
But Pineapples is also
Yeah.
really good and can bring the heat.
Awesome. Okay, so before we dive into the topic of today's show, which is the OWL Student Organization, I want to talk about each of your processes in applying to law school. Right around, I guess, 3 years ago for both of you. You both had like really full careers and graduate degrees and things. So Kathleen, you mentioned you pivoted to being a paralegal. And Neil, you were also sort of in like the politics side. So tell us about like, how did you really know that after being out of undergrad for as long as you were, how did you know that going to law school was the right decision?
I mean, I didn't know. Because for me, being a lawyer was never something that I thought about until I realized how just grossly unfulfilled I was in what I was doing. And I knew deep down that I had gone into the wrong field, even though it made sense on paper. It's what all my degrees led toward. So I honestly went back to the drawing board. I started doing just some like self-help, grit kind of exercises to figure out really what was in my heart. I looked at every career where I would be helping people, from nursing to being a college guidance counselor. The light bulb went off one day about being a lawyer because I had taught in prison during grad school. I'd done some advocacy work for people incarcerated in California and just always thought about one day helping people in the criminal legal system. I think what allowed me to confirm and be sure that I wanted to come to law school was that additional work experience, because at that point I'd been out of school for 5 years. So it was like, what's another couple years? I'd rather spend a few more years out here doing the day-to-day work, because no one in my family is a lawyer. And that really gave me the confidence to apply to law school and feel like this is what I want to do with the rest of my career.
Absolutely. And to be sure, to
be
take the
sure.
time to be sure. I love that.
Yes.
I love that. What about you, Neil?
Yeah, I think kind of similar to Kathleen's point that, initially wasn't on my radar. I think working at the White House, especially on natural disasters at the National Security Council staff, that was something where there were a lot of statutes involved, a lot of interpretation, a lot of the legal concepts and methods that you see that I was kind of encountering without really knowing what to do with them. And I think that was where the light bulb went, okay, this is a path that I want to take after this experience. I think for me, there was intentionality in terms of the varied kind of things that followed that, with the idea that hopefully law school would fit in, because my interest kind of crosses 3 disciplines: economics, law, and national security. And kind of how it tracked ended up being that I was spending time first in national security, then in kind of economics, business, and now law. And I think the biggest thing I learned through this whole process is that, you always have a plan A, but very rarely in life does plan A go. So there is intentionality with the understanding that, where I thought this would fit in may be different than what actually occurred. But I think the underlying desire to go to law school remained with me even when I started the process. I think for me it was 5 years out.
So what do you each remember about the process of applying? You had been out several years, each of you. And so walk us through your application process and like the timing and all of that stuff. What do you remember?
I can go first. It was a journey. So I left my corporate biotech job in September 2020, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. But I thought, it's the middle of the pandemic. It's fire season in California. I'm stuck inside anyway. Let me start studying for the LSAT. So I studied for the LSAT, and I was studying full time, and I took it for the first time in November 2020. Did not go well. It was one of the first flex administrations. I didn't even use that score. I canceled it. I ended up taking the LSAT 2 more times early in 2021. Still was not where I wanted to be. At that point, I was like, it was really hard for me. And I was like, I need to work first and make sure that I really want this and that I'm going to put myself through this again. So then for another year, I focused on work. I took the LSAT for the 4th time in June of 2021. To be honest with you, I still was not where I wanted to be. But at that point, I had done the work, and I was so sure that I wanted to apply to law school, and I felt confident in the rest of my application that I was like, we're just gonna leave it up to God.
Yeah.
So one of the LSATs that I took, I was also working full time. That was very challenging. And one thing I really tell people is to stagger, especially if you're working full time, the LSAT and the application, because there's a lot of work. There's a lot of essays. I spent so much time on my personal statement. I know we're going to talk about that. So I took it 4 times. 3 out of 4 times I wasn't working full time, but it was very challenging to fit
That's
it in.
good advice.
Yeah.
And I tell people, you really have to make the time and the space, and a lot of folks are working or they're going to school when they need to study for the LSAT, and so it's definitely a balance. I'm curious, Kathleen, since you went to school on the East Coast, you're kind of from the East Coast, but you have been in California for so long. How did you put together your school list? Were you kind of applying all over the country, or how did you decide where to apply?
So I guess about a year before I really started to put my application together, so like right around the time I took the LSAT for the last time, summer 2021, it had been about 5 or 6 years on the West Coast, and I just started to feel in my gut like I wanted to return to the East Coast. So my list of schools was pretty localized to the East Coast, but up and down from New England down to Georgia, I guess. My brother went to UT, so UT was on the list. A couple of schools in the Midwest, but yeah, I did really want to come back across the country.
Got it.
That made it, more challenging, especially when I was doing the virtual info sessions. I remember with the time zone difference.
Yep.
So there were challenges to it, and it was hard to visit.
We'll
talk about that later, but I didn't, visit any schools, like go to see a class before I was admitted.
Right.
Yeah.
It's tough when they're far away, for sure, and like kind of lingering, maybe COVID-y stuff. Okay, Neil, how about you? How did you navigate this process?
I'm laughing. People can't see, but I'm laughing because what I really appreciate about this podcast is, I have never talked to Kathleen about her journey. And I think what is comforting in this is that, and it could be true for a lot of owls, is that there is some element of this winding path. And for me, that was the case as well. So not atypical in the multiple takes. Also not atypical in the multiple cycles. My challenge here was that when I kind of decided I wanted to go to law school, I am very interested in this kind of intersection, as I mentioned, that looks at kind of export control, sanctions, investment restrictions. So it's like foreign policy, business, and law. And what makes it interesting is that, there is some element of, do you need a dual degree JD MBA? And that was something that I was fairly committed towards. So in going through the whole law school process, I was also paralleling that with the business school process. It's funny on campus where I meet JD MBAs, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm an MBA JD and non-concurrent. And that kind of result comes from the fact that when I went into the first cycle, 2018, 2019 of this, I had, in preparation for the LSAT, I first started off with the LSAT after I left the Obama administration. I had about 6 months before I got my fellowship to India, so I was doing somewhat of like a research assistantship with a former boss, and so that was when I used the first iteration of studying for the LSAT, and I did a class, went through that whole experience, didn't get the score that I wanted, then went abroad and realized it would be very difficult to actually take the LSAT again, but then shifted focus over to the GMAT. And so then did the whole GMAT there, got a score. I took the GMAT twice, got the score that I wanted, came back, and then I did probably 1 or 2 more LSATs there. Again, wasn't really happy, but then I went into the cycle where my strategy was to try to see, okay, where would I get in on the business school side, and then flip it with the law school side because I was a stronger business school candidate than law school candidate. Once that kind of shook out in that process itself, then I went to business school. I went to the Yale School of Management, and from there, I then tried to do the LSAT again. And I was doing it as a first-year business school student. Went through another individual who had gotten higher reviews in terms of being a tutor, got my highest score on the 4th time, and then went through that process. And so that was very difficult because you're at a non-concurrent school applying to other schools.
Right.
Went through all of that. Then, at the end of it, I was like, okay, I'll give it one last time. So I took the LSAT for a fifth time.
Oh, you beat me.
Yeah. and went with someone on the tutor side that had a very high reputation across all these podcasts. Actually didn't do as well as my fourth time. And then, I graduated from business school, was at BCG, but I still had the passion and fire to go to law school. And so on the last cycle, it was pretty much, I told my wife, I was like, look, if I'm meant to be a lawyer, I'm meant to be a lawyer. And I would say I definitely did constrict myself. And I think this is important for OWLs, is because you're coming in at a point where you have been multiple years out, there is somewhat of a juncture point where you're starting to come into territory of managerial responsibilities and how that conflicts with you then as an OWL will be starting as a first year in relation to KJDs. And so that is a slightly delicate balance there. And so I came to the conclusion on the last cycle that this was going to be it. For me, it was, I think everybody for the OWLs should have what is your why and what are you trying to get out of law school? Because you have to have that intentionality, because it's not only the opportunity cost of the managerial what you would be making, it's also in some cases, depending on your situation, what you're paying into it. So there is a massive opportunity cost that is not insignificant. And so for me, it was somewhere on the T14 or higher because I wanted to be able to have a shot at a big law job. And the mechanic and the numbers and situations behind that, I'd feel more comfortable going at a place where their numbers and percentages are very high in relation to who's applying for those types of jobs than, saying, okay, I'll go to X place and then I'll try to be the top 5% of students, or I'll transfer, something like that. You just really don't know with this environment in general, because you've never done it, that it's best to go in eyes wide open and set your objective and then work your school list in relation to that.
I have so much to say about what you two both just shared, which is, first of all, the grit and determination and sort of resilience that you both showed, taking the LSAT again and again and again. And even, it sounds like, even at the end of the day, feeling like maybe your score wasn't even where you wanted it to be, but you were so sure that law school is what you wanted to do that you were like, I've got to take this shot. And I think that is such important advice for people out there. If your LSAT isn't where you want it to be, there are so many other things in the application that are very important to us and to other admissions officers. And so focusing on those, finally saying, okay, I've taken the LSAT, I've done everything I can there. I'm going to focus on everything else in the application. I think that is so important. Second, what you said, Neil, about if you are going to pivot at this sort of lucrative part of your career where you are going to potentially be taking the next step in a managerial sense, you have to be really sure about law school, and you have to go to the right place, because you're not going to give that all up to go to somewhere that you're not really excited about and not really sure about. And then lastly, sort of the humility involved in you're both coming out with these incredible careers, and you're starting day one of law school, and you almost have a sense, I imagine, of starting over a little bit, and you're with people who just came out of school. I just love everything you both shared, because it's very real, it's very relatable. Nobody's application is perfect. People might think that one element of it is going to make them unsuccessful, and both of you are such obvious examples that is just not true. And if you are sure about something, dig in, stay the course, keep going. This is a big piece of advice I always give: keep going. And so I'm really happy that you both did, because you have thrived at UVA. I think one more piece before we move on that is a very common question I get from folks who have been working is letters of recommendation. You two were both out, I would say, enough time that you could only use professional letters. But how did you do that, and how did you balance the time that had passed, if you were reaching back out to university professors? How did you navigate what can be tricky with supervisors? Tell us about that.
I mean, I don't remember, but I must have asked someone for advice and learned that even though I was so far out, I still should have academic professor recommendations. I was a STEM major, and so a lot of my classes were very big. But I had done a master's, and I had done a thesis during that master's. So my thesis advisor was someone that was just an obvious person that I was going to reach back out to.
Makes sense, yep.
And then, I also, the other academic letter I ended up getting was from a Portuguese teacher who I took Portuguese my senior year at Brown. It was a 6-person class. I was the only senior. I got very into it. And we had a personal relationship that lasted long after I left Brown. And I watched her do her PhD defense on Zoom during the pandemic in Brazil. And so I reached back out to her. But with the language barrier, there was some heavy lifting that had to be done with getting her recommendation together. So I did 2 academic letters of rec, and then I did 2 professional letters of recommendation. So because I had just left my corporate job and told them I'm leaving because I just said that I wanted to go to law school, even though I still honestly wasn't totally sure, but it was a good, this is why I'm leaving. So I guess about a year after I left that job, I reached back out to my former boss and got a letter of recommendation. Even though I had no intention to pursue anything in law like what I did in biotech, I did feel like, okay, this is a part of my application, a part of my background that is so unique. I do feel like a letter of rec that gives more detail to what I did would help my application because it's not coming out anywhere else. The final letter of recommendation was from my current employer at the law firm, and they hired me knowing that I was taking this job to decide if I wanted to go to law school, so there was no awkwardness with getting that letter of recommendation.
So you had a really good mix, I would say. Folks who can definitely speak to skills that are required in law school, but not necessarily like a Portuguese, you know what I mean? And then again, this I think is so important for people to hear. It's people who know you well, period, and who know your work ethic and who know your personality. And yes, maybe the law firm folks could speak to skills relevant for law school, but the others, I just want to know more about your professionalism, your maturity, things like that. What about you, Neil?
So this is a very funny answer because there were multiple cycles. And I think the biggest thing to talk about this is, and I think you've said this on multiple other podcasts, is that if you are a reapplicant, I hadn't been a reapplicant to UVA when I applied, but if you are a reapplicant, whenever you're going through this, you do have to make those considerations of what is new, what has changed in your life. And so I take that kind of point to then kind of apply to my situation where over the multiple cycles, the recommenders did change. So when I first went through it, I had been, I think, 1 or 2 years out from the government. And so I got former bosses from the White House who had moved on, but were in different roles, either in government or outside of government. By the time I applied to you, it was a very unique situation. I had been in business school, and everybody in my business school class across all 300 so people knew that I wanted to go to law school. So what I did in business school is all my electives were taken at Yale Law School. And then the entire recommendation list was all professors from those classes. So I think that kind of wraps to the point where if you're applying multiple cycles, if you're applying in different points of your career, they will adjust. And then you also have to be strategic in terms of how you're applying and where you're applying and what are the skills and highlights that you want to be coming out of that application that might not already be evident in the resume or stuff like that. By the time I was going in my last iteration, it was on the fact that I had taken a good enough law school to be an LLM over there. So that was kind of the thought process to those recommendations at the later stage.
I think it's definitely important to make sure for folks who either are reapplying, like Neil mentioned, or if you are somebody who got your letter's recommendation when you were still in undergrad, but then you ended up waiting several years to apply, make sure your letters are at least somewhat current. Anything older than 2 years old for a letter, you do kind of want to think about at least supplementing, if not updating, those particular letters. So that is all great advice. So how did you both ultimately decide on UVA? Because I think, at least in Neil's case, maybe in Kathleen's case, you both had significant others to take into account. So how did, were they hoping for a certain outcome? Were you hoping? How did it all come together?
My boyfriend and I, at the point when I was applying to law school, we'd been together for only about 2.5 years. It was very serious. And most of that time up until that point had been long distance, as it still is. But at the point when I was getting ready to apply, I remember having a conversation with him, and we were in San Francisco, and I was like, okay, well, I've worked long enough. I've confirmed that this is what I want to do. I'm getting ready to apply. I'm thinking about my list of schools. Do you want to come with me? Should my list be built around where you want to be? And he was like, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if I'm ready to sign up to go to Austin or Minneapolis or Charlottesville. But, he said, I want to be with you. We can make this work. And we'd already done a lot of long distance. So it was a hard conversation, but it was real. And it basically allowed me to just apply independently of him.
That's kind of nice, actually.
And all his wishes. I will say it was very nice. Law school has given me the ability to have a nurturing, loving relationship, but also just be selfish and, pursue my goals and my dreams and better myself. And I'm grateful to him that he trusted me enough and believed in us enough to allow me to do that. And so we did not talk about if he was going to move until I got in. So the first place I got in was UVA. And I said, okay, I'm in. Are you going to come to Charlottesville with me? And he was like, I looked it up and there's direct flights from New York. And so,
And it is a super quick 50-minute flight. Just did it myself 2 days ago. And
so he was not a part of my decision to choose UVA. I wanted, like Neil, I wanted to go to the best school possible, but I really did want it to be the right fit. And I had a best friend who went to UVA for undergrad. So I'd been to Charlottesville. I actually was looking to come to a college town. I love college towns. I lived in Berkeley, Providence. I really wanted a smaller town with a rah-rah school spirit. I wanted to go to sports games. I wanted a strong campus life. I also wanted a very friendly environment. Brown was very friendly. You could just make friends standing in line at the cafeteria or in class, everywhere you go. And I had heard that about UVA. And when I visited, once I got admitted, that is really what allowed me to just feel so confident. And my partner came with me to Admitted Students Day, also loved it, had the same impressions of me about how just generous everyone that I met was with their time and their willingness to help me come here.
I love this story because, he was part of it, but you still got the freedom to choose for 100% yourself, like you said. And so that's great. Neil, I know you had a slightly different experience, so share how that went down.
Yeah, so shout out to Denise, my wife. And I say this because so we've known each other. We met at the last year of undergrad. We didn't date until after, so we've known each other now for 11 years, and when we graduate next year will be our 5-year anniversary, a month later. And so she has been through a lot with this entire process, both business school, law school, moving. And so, going into this, what changed from where UVA came on my radar a little more prominently, well, I first knew about UVA because a lot of my undergrad classmates from Georgetown went here. And so then, I would see them whether in D.C. or other places, and they would rave so much about the culture and community here. What then changed it for me to really put a lot of consideration in is we had a mini moon back in 2021. And, the mini moon was, I think, around Nellie's Ford or something. But on the way, we did a night in Charlottesville, and then we toured, UVA. I had never been. We toured UVA and the law school. And we really enjoyed it. We really loved the kind of environment and atmosphere. And so that's really what then gravitated me towards it. And then ultimately also, my side quest there is that I'm a Navy reservist, and knowing that the JAG school is right there as well. Those were other elements that came together. So in kind of the last cycle for me, it was only 3 schools at that point. And I was considering, and for me, what made UVA, in terms of kind of talking to Denise about this, was, it had to be relatively close to DC or for her family, which lives in Connecticut. So it was one of the two, New York or D.C., really, at that point. And she was, thankfully willing to come to come to Charlottesville. And it is a different in terms of that change from a major city to a college town. But throughout the last 6-7 years of this whole entire ordeal, she has been 100% supportive. And even though she's a consultant, so she has to fly around. Even though we went from places where now, she used to have direct flights from DCA.
Yeah.
Now her commute time is drastically much higher. She was supportive 100% along the way, knowing that ultimately, this is what I had a burning passion for. I wouldn't have gone through all this cycles, all this stuff, if I didn't truly, at the end of the day, come to terms with saying, I know this is what I'm called to do.
Shout out to Denise.
For real.
I mean, flying out of Charlottesville Airport is delightful because it's very quick and easy. But yes, we only fly 5 places direct. So unless she's working in, New York, D.C., Chicago, you're doing connections. But I think, we've had a kind of longer lead up to talking about the actual topic of today's show, but I think it's so important because for anyone out there who is going to be an OWL, an older, wiser law student, these are all the considerations that I think people maybe have anxiety about or worried about. Is it going to be different for me? What, having a significant other, I think, is more common in the sort of if you've been out for several years and taking them into account. Whether that means you do long distance like Kathleen, whether that means you're bringing your partner like Neil, I think these are all just super important considerations to have. And Charlottesville, for the working spouse or the working partner, unless you're working remotely, your job isn't necessarily in Charlottesville. So I think these are all just really, really important things for people to know. Okay, so you both arrived here in the fall as 1Ls. Did you have any anxiety or reservations about, okay, now I'm going back to school? Did that transition feel difficult or was it just kind of natural?
So my story is kind of interesting. So after I graduated business school because I went active duty for a semester, I graduated around December 21, so January 22, and then I started in fall 23. In that year and a half, I was also doing a professional course for the Navy. So I've been consistently in that mindset. So it wasn't the academic switch of going to readings and doing that stuff. I think the cultural shift, one that I knew and wanted to embrace, where kind of we talked earlier, I'm the oldest in my section. And the kind of fine point to this, which kind of you step back and you don't realize the cultural difference until you think about it. One of my best friends he was the youngest in our section. We sat next to each other for pretty much all of our 1L classes, and it just so happened initially, and then it just developed into a whole bit. We are separated by 8 days, and then it's a full decade.
Oh my God.
Get out.
So the first month was definitely a cultural adjustment, even one that I had mentally prepared for, because my business school entire interaction was truncated with COVID. So normally what people think of business school is you're going jet setting around the world with your classmates. That wasn't that. Also, I was preparing to try to get into law school. So that was just very uniquely different. And I'm really close with all my business school counterparts. It's my 5-year, even when I graduate from law school. But I wanted to make sure my law school classmates as well, that I had that type of relationship with. Now, that is also juxtaposed with the fact that my spouse doesn't have a built-in community here in Charlottesville, that she travels a lot for her work. And so trying to have that balance when I'm not in school on what is my level of social engagement, that was something that initially was kind of that balancing act and trying to find what is the sweet spot of this. I think that was the honest first 1 to 2 months of just, everybody's going out to bar review, this and the other. I'm at a different point in my career. What I think of doing that on a Friday night is very different than when I was out of undergrad than when I am now. And so those are just growing pains to get kind of to acclimate. And that's something that even if you know and you're prepared for, it'll hit you when you get there. But I think after that kind of initial point, you do find your circle of friends and you do kind of develop around what that looks like. And all my best friends are all KJDs. And that's kind of a testament to kind of just both the kind of group of people here in my section in our class, and also the fact that, I've been able to move. And I think personally, it is very helpful for OWLs to get that experience of being able to work with people younger. Because I went in a room when I was at the White House where I was the youngest in the room. I have now flipped it to now I'm the oldest. And being able to manage in those two different capacities, you're going to go through life where you may be the oldest on your team, you may be the youngest. And if you aren't prepared for those two different cultural differences, it can really impact not only performance but team cohesiveness. And so I think this was an experience that I knew coming in, but I'm 1,000% like fully happy that I've been ingratiated in.
Sounds like you're young at heart, potentially. It warms my heart, really, because it makes me think that we have admitted all the right people. Like, nobody is unrelatable to anybody, right? And even if you do feel that way at first, it's the coming together. It's the what we call engaging across differences. So I love hearing that. What about you, Kathleen?
I was really excited to come back to school. I was very nervous and anxious for sure. I had started over socially multiple times out in the Bay Area. I lived in a bunch of different places, had a bunch of different roommates, multiple careers. So it wasn't just starting fresh. I think it was just I just had no idea what law school was gonna be like. The beginning was very disorienting. Similar to Neil, a section of 30 people. I think there were 4 of us that graduated before the pandemic.
Wow.
And similar to Neil, on especially the first semester, you're so socialized in and around your section. It can be very hard to break out of that, and a lot of what everyone's doing to socialize is going out to bars. And I similarly, come Friday, we had class till 5 p.m. on Fridays. I was like, I don't know. That's just not how I want to spend my time. And so I found that I was using student groups, using time in class with co-sections to meet people, find people who had similar backgrounds and experiences. Something that I also found that was incredibly disorienting is like during orientation, you're getting to know each other. You're talking about your careers and how many times, you took the LSAT or whatever, just parts of your journey before you came here. And then once classes start, no one's talking about anything besides school. No one's talking about life.
So true.
It felt like no one wanted to get to know me and who I was. I didn't feel seen. That was really hard. I felt incredibly one-dimensional and at the same level as someone who was 10 years, younger. It was just strange.
At first, I thought you meant that in a positive way, like we're all on the same playing field. It doesn't matter where we all came from. But I get that can be almost isolating in a way because you're like, wait, I had this whole career.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I really leaned on OWLs, people I met through that community who had all these life experiences. And it was a place where it was for us to talk about all of that. I think another thing that was incredibly disorienting, I don't know if you'll agree, Neil, is like having these careers where we had to make very consequential decisions, high stakes. And then you're in a place where all everyone's concerned with are grades. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
Well, it's good. It gives you perspective, I feel like.
Yes, it gives you perspective.
Yeah. Well, 1,000% their perspective is something that keeps, I think, for a lot of OWLs, their sanity in check. And I've had that type of conversation with multiple people, both in my section who are OWLs and outside. And it's one where we have had experiences that, whether it's in some form of client services of some sort, where you kind of understand, okay, if you're trying to make that pivot to big law or you're trying to do a different type, like you understand what is expected in the workplace and how you've already had a career where that you can showcase those skills. For my classmates who are KJDs, the individual I talked about, he graduated early, so I think he only became 21 that summer. So there's not a lot of reference points for those individuals that you have to orient yourself around grades, firm prestige, clerks. Those are things that are just naturally going to funnel themselves in because there is no reference point to what is not outside of that. And so I think that is the perspective that when you're an OWL coming in, that is very helpful because it keeps you grounded in, both the mechanics of how the law school exam functions and stuff like that, but then also the larger picture of like, where does this function? And I think at the end of the day, the touch the grass moment was I'm at UVA.
Right.
I will have a good shot of doing what I want to do in my career. I made that decision to come here. It will be fine. And you tell yourself that. You have a partner who kind of helps you reaffirm that. And I think that perspective is something where when that isolating feeling naturally kicks in, you're able to kind of take yourself out of it every once in a while because you just stop and you think about it.
Well, and I think you both had such, as we talked about a second ago, you really, really made sure that this was where you want to be. And that's part of life perspective. That's part of the winding roads it took for you both to get to UVA Law through the application process and everything. And so you're extra confident that you're in the right place. And so I could see a way that a less than ideal grade is not going to derail you. And I don't want to say it's derailing KJDs either. We have about 20% KJDs in any given class these days. I myself was a KJD, and I will admit freely, I did not have the perspective that you two have coming in at all. And I think something, Kathleen, you said that I just really want to highlight because I never thought about this before. The divide between you two as OWLs and maybe other OWLs from not having college impacted by COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that is so critical to think about for a second, because if you were just 3 years out in your class, then you graduated in 2019 and your college life was not. Now, that's not to say that COVID didn't impact your life. Of course, it impacted everybody's life. I was 15 years out and it impacted my life. But having your college, and nowadays we're seeing people's high school that was impacted, but that's just that in and of itself sort of creates almost like a mini generational divide. Because you just have really different experiences. I think you were going to say maybe one more thing.
I was going to say, well, also, we had so many years as an adult in office and out in the real world, not impacted by COVID. So even the folks who were a couple years out, they had probably graduated in the pandemic and only worked remote jobs. So I think it just created it's a divide.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think, and one of the things I think about when I was in those isolated places or I didn't feel seen. When you're older, you know how to get what you need. You know what you need and you know how to get it. So for me, also as a public service student, I felt that so quickly, this massive wave of everyone looking at private practice, within my section. And so I was just like, oh my God, I was so wanting to meet people who had similar interests and values and ambitions for their careers. And so I knew, okay, I have to seek these out and I can do that. And so I joined student groups, like public interest student groups. And I'd been out in the world for a long time. I know how to make friends in the wild. I know that you have to hustle. And so I took these affirmative steps to, I guess, be more fulfilled. And I felt one-dimensional as a law student, but I know I have so many other interests. And so I tried to, through student groups, through going to karaoke, whatever it was, trying to make sure that I was fulfilling all parts of myself. And I knew what I needed to do that.
And I think to that point, what also helps is you are bringing in a network that is prior established to law school. And so for me, and I assume you'd have the same reaction, Kathleen, is that a lot of my undergrad colleagues who went KJD, they're coming up now to year 7 as associates, and some of them I saw on LinkedIn. One of them is just became the non-equity partner at Kirkland, and so those are things where when I was going through the career side of the process, I would just reach out to my undergrad colleagues.
Another thing I didn't even think about.
And then that really is something that, OWLs, wherever you went to school, there's going to be someone that you knew who went to law school before you did. And you can rely on those people from that network to help you get through those isolation periods, those periods that are uncomfortable because you are going through the first time. And then it's also a good way to pay it back because one of my undergrad classmates, she just started as a 1L at Fordham Law after about 7 or 8 years at Google. And I saw it on LinkedIn, and then I just texted her and I said, hey, I'm here for you, if there's anything. And we caught up. And I think that kind of is what is kind of the benefit on the OWL side, is that you come in at a point in your life where people will have done stuff before you and after you, and you can rely upon that in being able to navigate those uncertainties, the turbulent times, whereas some of your classmates, they would only have their other classmates who are as 1L'd or what have you. And so that is something of the benefit and kind of reassuring point.
Has today's Halloween special got you excited for other upcoming holidays? Be sure to check out one of my all-time favorite episodes of the podcast, Season 4, Episode 3, Law School Love Story, where UVA Law faculty Crystal Shin and Jordan McKay joined me to talk about how they met and fell in love as students at UVA Law.
I remember Jordan in our Civ Pro class. He was dressed almost daily in like khakis, a button-down shirt. He carried a briefcase, whereas like the rest of us, like we just rolled out of bed and barely had time to put on sweats. But he came looking like a little business person. And I remember that he was kind of a gunner, and he would volunteer.
Not true.
He would volunteer
False.
to answer questions when I was just like praying and hoping I wouldn't get cold called. And so I noticed Jordan right away. I thought he was cute, but didn't have that many opportunities to talk to him in fall of 1L year.
I will correct some of the statements that were made. I didn't have a briefcase.
You
I had
did have a brown
It
briefcase.
wasn't a briefcase. It was just like a tote bag,
Like a leather tote bag for your laptop.
For my laptop. It wasn't like a briefcase.
This is one of those episodes where I really wish listeners could just see your faces, like while the other person is telling the story. It's amazing.
Yes. And I also was not a gunner. Like, I did not volunteer.
Yes, you did.
No. And we can talk to Professor Nelson.
We should ask Professor Nelson. I trust his memory better than both of ours. He will 100% confirm my side of the story.
Did you two feel that you appreciated a school environment? I know we've talked about some of the challenges, which I think is definitely, I'm so glad you both mentioned that because I think that's really important to highlight. But did you feel that you also appreciated an academic environment because you're like, well, I'm not working full time? And I've said this multiple times on the show. Being in school, no matter how much you love your job, and I love my job, is just a different, you're your own boss, you're on your own schedule. Now, it does take being a self-starter, but I'm curious if you felt being out in the working world could actually make you appreciate the academic schedule and almost freedom more.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is more flexibility. You can really modulate it how you want, build it exactly to what you want. And you can have, so I think about this often, like the diverse things that I do with my day, the diverse skill set that I have to use and the different types of activities. Also, I mean, I've had jobs where I was running 7 meetings a day and now I just show up to class and maybe I get cold called, which is really nerve-wracking, or maybe I don't.
Yeah.
And it's active because you're always absorbing information, but a lot of times it is just more passive. There's not as much pressure. The stakes aren't as high.
I think that's so helpful for people to hear.
Yeah. I also think something I think about is when you're working, you're looking out for yourself. There might be other teams and people there in theory to support you, but personally, that's something I learned day one in corporate is like, there is no one who cares about you besides you. And being in an academic environment, a place where there are just so many resources and people who are genuinely willing to help me, from the librarians at the reference desk to Helen Duggar from the Virginia Loan Forgiveness Program. It's like, yes, I want to, the IT department, love them. Need to go to them later. I just want to, maximize the support I can get while I'm here because these people they're so willing to help. And you don't always have that out in the real world.
Right. Given that we are already like an hour in, I really want to get to OWLs. What it is, how and when you both discovered it and decided to become a part of it. So I'm just going to start quickly by reading the description on UVA Law's website. Older, wiser law students, OWLs. The OWLs at UVA strive to enhance the experience of non-traditional law students by organizing social events, facilitating mentorship, arranging networking opportunities, and holding other events that uniquely benefit members. While OWL's core focus is students who come to UVA Law with professional/life experience between undergrad and law school, the organization is open to all. Old souls, friends, spouses, partners, and significant others are welcome as OWLs. So I'm curious, basically, how you each discovered it. Was it as a 1L, as a student org? Tell me a little bit about that, how you got involved or became to be a member.
I discovered it at the admitted students open house at the student activities fair, or the student org fair.
Love that.
Ryan Moore, my predecessor, was at the table, and I was so excited.
Oh.
Yeah, because I knew that it was going to be a significant part of my identity. And so once I got here and did the activities fair as a 1L, signed up and was showing up to that first event.
Love that.
Yeah.
My section mate, Shivani, who ended up also working with
Co-pres.
Kathleen as co-president, she just said, hey, Neil, come to this, one event. And I'm not going to say that there was food involved, that was the triggering factor. But once I got there and enjoyed the company, and then, shout out to Ryan, Kathleen's predecessor, it was just a community that I knew that was going to be a very significant part of me.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where, whether, I guess, through word of mouth or the marketing from the admitted students, people find their way there.
Well, and like you both have shared up until this point, you have very real things in common with other OWLs that are, despite having best friends being KJDs, having this like-minded community I could see being just really important. So Kathleen, you were president of OWLs, or it sounds like co-president.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit why you decided to run for leadership.
Yeah, so I had a great experience with the organization my 1L year. I met people like Shivani, who became my co-president. I met some other women who I grew really close to. And Ryan did a great job. He was basically running the show by himself. And I thought, with me and my friend Shivani, if we ran for co-presidents and we get at least one other person on board, there's so much more that we could do to grow this organization. And this is such a unique, we're serving such a unique niche in the law school. And OWLs is not a professional organization. We have so many organizations at the school that are trying to get people jobs. So I think OWLs is so unique because it can just offer a community that, I keep using the word unique, that is just, it just has its own.
Yeah, because you all are unique.
Yeah.
And so it's a community within a community. So talk a little bit about what does that look like in practice? Do you put on events? Do you just have like a group meet? Do you go to things together? Like if you were describing to somebody who's listening who would be interested in joining OWLs, like what's the programming like, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, so the programming, it's mostly social programming. So I would say one thing that I really wanted to do is I wanted to grow the community and increase participation. I wanted to increase the name of the organization, just get the brand out there, because it's only about 5 years old. So there's a lot of people who are OWLs who don't even know about it. So I really just wanted to increase the presence. So we have Carter Mountain event in the fall.
Fun.
We have Owls Giving. Anytime we can put owls in the name, we do it. We have.
Well, let's talk about OWL-oween.
OWL-oween.
Because this episode is coming out on Halloween on Friday, October 31st. And when I first heard about OWL-oween, I'm like, I got to get the owls on this release date. So what is OWL-oween?
So I don't know what the executive board is planning for this year's OWL-oween. Are you aware?
I could see definitely a party of some sort in the social nature. And I think building off Kathleen's point, from the increased participation, it's great being a 3L now and seeing how each president has kind of shepherded owls along. And so, when we came as 1L, like Ryan was just trying to make sure that people knew the thing just existed. And so from there to then Kathleen, where now it was becoming a bigger brand. And now even this year I've seen kind of both career events, social events, things mixed in. So it's been a great progression to see that. And there very well be OWL-oween, and it could come up in the Sunday newsletter that we get. So I wouldn't put it past that.
So another thing that we do is we have these flagship barbecues that at least my executive board, we held ourselves to having at least one a semester. We had a spring kickoff barbecue right around the time we first got elected. It was like Project X. We had undergrads there. I mean, it was so well attended. It made me so happy to see so much excitement around this community. So maybe OWL-oween is a Halloween-themed barbecue because I know that they're due for a barbecue.
Well, and I know at the law school we have a Halloween carnival where law students who have little ones bring them by in their costumes and all of that. So maybe there'll be some sort of like crossover.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, I think there's a softball team. Maybe,
yes.
and or, crossover with other organizations that make sense, like Virginia Law Families and Partners, things like that. So it sounds like, the number one concern of OWLs is making sure that, especially for the new 1Ls, that they know, hey, there is a community of older, wiser law students here for you.
There's also, I'll add, there's mentorship as well.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about
Neil,
that.
Were you a part of that last year? Am I misremembering?
No.
Okay. So, I mean, that was something I took advantage of my 1L year and something I actually thought about earlier when Neil was speaking. Coming from working, the lack of feedback you get, particularly first semester where all your classes are just exams. The only feedback I got was from my writing fellow.
Yeah.
That was hard. And so mentorship was a way that I cured that. And having a mentor from OWLs was extremely helpful. So, yes, we also have mentorship opportunities.
And what about, I know you are both involved in many other things. So you're part of OWLs, and what else takes up your time, your very busy schedules as law students?
It's different now compared to last year. Last year I was co-president of OWLs. I was on the executive board of another student organization. I had commitments for my journal. I do pro bono throughout the year.
2L year tends to be like where everything converges on you. Like your class schedule is still so busy and you are super involved in your student org. So I imagine a lot of that was 2L year. And now you're a little bit, I hope, have a little more free time as a 3L.
Well, I'm still a co-president of a different organization, the Libel Show. And I am in 2 clinics this semester. So I have a caseload through the public defender's office here in Charlottesville. That is taking up a lot of my time, but it's been one of the best things I've done in law school. So I would say it's the clinics, a little bit still the student org. I feel like I was much more involved in student orgs. I just had I was just on more boards. Yeah. So this year I kind of have one focus, and it's a big focus.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my level of engagement and stuff has only gone one direction. So not common for the 3 LOL is kind of when the third years is commonly known to like kind of relax and, you have your job in hand and what have you.
Not all of us.
Public defense the public sector is very different than kind of the private sector on that end. And so I'd say like for me, the biggest thing is on kind of the journal itself, with being the editor-in-chief of the Journal of International Law, then the moot court for international law as well. Those take up a lot of my time. Pro bono as well, kind of doing the writing fellow for the LLMs. And then even outside of the school, both being a reservist, doing the once a month, and then tomorrow I'm flying out to Germany for an investment security conference. So, like, there are things that pile up. So I think it has only gone one way, actually.
Yeah, really.
Cheers.
You guys are so busy. So you both touched on careers. So I want to talk about what you're going to be doing after graduation, if you know.
Don't know. That's another thing I should have said that is taking up a lot of my time is
Yeah.
looking for a job. So I am looking at public defender jobs, kind of standard public defense, working with adults. I also am interested in defending children. So I'm looking at juvenile defense positions as well as some parental defense positions. So defending parents when they're charged with abuse and neglect.
And are you open to going anywhere? Are you trying to stay? Are you like making this decision now with the boy? Like, how is that going?
Yes, we are trying to coordinate. So I am primarily looking in New York, but I am also going to be expanding that a little bit to try to coordinate with his job search as well.
Got it.
So, yeah, we don't want to do long distance anymore.
I imagine. It's been long enough.
It's been long enough.
A long time of long distance.
Yeah.
And how about you, Neil?
Yeah, and a quick point to Kathleen. I think coming from the working world, one important fact is that you normally, when you're going in between jobs, outside of like certain pathways post-undergrad, people don't hire you like 9 months in advance. They normally hire you within a shorter time frame.
Right.
And so the public side of kind of the public-private at law school tends to actually track more to the real working world than the private side of the house. Because the private side, you're going to go do an internship, assuming you do well there, you get an offer going into. So the kind of, as Kathleen has mentioned, right, like especially now in the current environment, there's just more flux in the public sector stuff that otherwise, whether honors program or, local kind of counties offices, like there's just much more of a different pathway. And I think for OWLs, just because you come in here, you don't have to go down the like private big law route. You can choose that path you want. And I think that's the biggest foot stomp from this whole conversation is that if you know your why and why you're coming in, don't let the noise of kind of, as Kathleen said it, right? Like most of her class, statistically most people end up in big law, but that's not everybody's path. And you have more of a perspective as an OWL to know what is your path. So for me, coming in, big law was for me specifically because I wanted to look at national security from that perspective. So I'll be at a firm, Wilson Sonsini, after graduation in D.C. working on the national security practice. So export controls, sanctions, investment restrictions. I haven't foreclosed clerkships yet. And again, that's another point. Like a lot of people will try to do clerkships. Whether that's right for you is kind of your own kind of journey there. And for me and my wife want to finally establish, move into D.C., looking for that kind of home ownership and everything with the D.C. or the surrounding areas. So, like, if it is a clerkship for me, it's looking at more of, like, Maryland, Virginia, D.C., or because she has family up in New York, Court of International Trade or something specialty in that sense. So I think for me, that is kind of the immediate next step is definitely the firm, but then also if it's within that range, a clerkship, but more tailored and focused to either the D.C. or New York area.
So I feel that I know the answer to this question maybe, but as we start to wrap up, you guys have shared so much great advice, and I think you both have so many similar threads, but also such different experiences. So I think this is going to be so helpful for people. For folks out there who are non-traditional, and I was just at a big recruiting event in New York, and I met so many people who have been out 5, 6, 7 years. What advice would you share with them that maybe you haven't touched on yet as they are putting together their application materials?
I would say definitely don't let the fact that you've been out for so long, that you just realized you wanted to go to law school, that you're non-traditional in one of many senses, intimidate you, make you feel like, oh, I need to get it together and just get in there quick because there's all these kids going straight from undergrad. I'm going to be at a disadvantage. No, you're not. It's a holistic review process for these applications. There are going to be so many pieces of your application that are going to be strong, and you are going to be so strong when you get there. You're going to have so much experience, lived experience, that is going to allow you to navigate law school in a different way than your classmates, and you shouldn't let that shake you. And like Neil was saying, I think the more that you can do, if you're non-traditional, to confirm that this is what you want. Like that was so helpful for me to know, to have the actual work experience just for a little bit. It's gonna really help you weather the storm and the hard times. And right, like you were saying, just find quiet when there's all this noise around you.
Absolutely. And to bide your time, I think, and to not feel rushed.
Yeah.
And feel like, you're missing out because you're not starting yet. It is never going to be worth it to go before you know that it's your time to go.
Yeah, I would say kind of adding to that, know that at the end of the day, it's only not a dream for you when you decide it's not a dream. And especially in this kind of field. When I was growing up, I wanted to be in the NBA. I realized in 9th grade when I went and there were 70 other people trying out for freshman basketball that was not going to happen. And I take that example because you look at it in the sense of, okay, I came to the conclusion that that dream was not going to be for me. That was kind of influenced by realistic expectations. But I think when you carry over to the law school stuff, I would say this, right? Like both me and Kathleen have gone through multiple cycles, multiple exams, and I think at the end of it, we had kind of a North Star, something guiding us to make it that our dream, that we still had that dream. And we had some realism in terms of what the percentages and what we were trying to get out of it, but we kept at it because we still wanted that dream. And so if you are out there and you have that itch and you know and you can match it to your why and you're like, okay, like this is what I really want to do, don't let, like you're going to, there's a lot in analysis that goes on in this space, whether it's Reddit, whether it's other, consultancy podcasts and stuff like that, that will give you numbers and statistics. It comes down to you. And so I think the biggest thing I can tell OWLs is because you've had that real lived experience, rely upon that and know that you've made it far in life because of those experiences, that when you're looking at law school, if it is your dream and you believe that and you've taken that idealism and practical realism together, then pursue it. Because kind of to your point earlier in this, you don't succeed if you don't take the shot. I think the Wayne Gretzky quote is like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yeah. And there's like a Michael Jordan equivalent to that of like, he takes all these shots, he misses them, but that's why he succeeds. And I think that is the biggest thing I can impart on OWLs is that, I would rather not be like 12, 14 more years down in my career and then always look back and be like, I wish I had gone to law school. Take the shot if you really believe that. And let the consequences come from that.
I could not agree more. At least you did everything you could. I think that is all such wonderful advice. Really, last question. You're both 3Ls, which I cannot believe. What will you miss most about UVA Law? Or do you have a favorite memory or a favorite tradition from your time here? What are you going to miss when you look back on it?
I mean, I love coming to school. It's so social. You just get to see so many people. As an extrovert, it's amazing. Like while I do, have clients outside of school and kind of am just a lawyer in Charlottesville now, I still come to school a lot just because I just love walking through the doors. And I think it's honestly it's the setting. It's, the people and all the different ways that you can pursue your interests, and again, like be selfish and invest in yourself.
It's great to have a built-in place where you can go and see kind of all your friends, and it feels like home. For listeners out there, if anybody ever calls our office, Kathleen's voice might sound familiar because she also moonlights as one of our student workers. So if you catch her on one of her shifts, you might hear her voice. So you're not going crazy. If you have heard this voice before, that's why, or in the future. What about you, Neil?
Yeah, I think it's the friendships. When you go in the working world, you tend to kind of congregate around people at your job or, one or two activities here and there. But, even in classes now, I think the biggest difference I've noticed in myself over the 3 years is that in 1L, I'd go to class. I'd still be very sociable, but I'd come home and that would be it. And now I have more clubs and activities, but there's not a small seminars of 16 people or what have you and stuff like that. There's a good chance I know most of the people in the class, and I just was shocked. I think this first month of law school really was eye opening because I could walk down and I would know people that otherwise through all these different interactions that I've come to appreciate and really understand. And so I think the community, one big plug finally for OWLs on UVA is that culture sometimes is not something people think about during the admissions process as much as prestige in all these other categories. I think for OWLs, that probably has a much greater weight, right? You would think of yourself going into organizations. If an organization is toxic, you won't want to go there. UVA structurally, in terms of how it sets up incentive structures and stuff like that, UVA Law in terms of how they set up incentive structures, as well as just the environment of softball classes, what you do, Dean Blazer, in terms of picking students, the culture is as advertised. I mean, there's I didn't even think about it as much as I should have, but I'm 100% drinking the punch there on this. So I would say that is something that I will miss, is that culture in a way that, you might gloss over it when you're applying, but I really think you shouldn't.
I just have one last thing to say to the non-traditional older students is like, when you're going through this process, the stakes do feel higher, as we've spoken about. And like oftentimes they are. You're giving up more. You might have someone else in your life who you have to factor into the equation, lost earning potential. But you have to know your why, and you also really have to believe that it's going to work out. Even if you don't get into your dream school, which for many people listening to this podcast is probably UVA, it was for me. You are so capable. You have been out there in the workforce. Maybe you've had multiple careers. You've figured it out. You just have to know that it's going to all work out. So know your why and know that too.
Stay the course.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Neil and Kathleen, this has been so wonderful. I think you both shared answers and conversation that I honestly hadn't thought of. And I feel like if I haven't thought about it, a lot of people haven't, because I think about these things all day long. So I think this was incredibly helpful. Also probably because I was a KJD and I was completely clueless. I was just turned 22, and probably all the owls in my section were like, who is this? This was wonderful. I want to wish you both happy OWL-oween. And we're going to really hope that this, that this event catches on this year. Thank you both. This has been Admissible with me, Dean Natalie Blazer at the University of Virginia School of Law. My guests today were third-year law students Neil Noronha and Kathleen Samuelson. For more information about UVA Law, please visit law.virginia.edu. The next episode of Admissible will be out soon. In the meantime, you can follow the show on Instagram at Admissible Podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and please remember to rate the show wherever you listen to podcasts.